Okay, just giving everyone a few seconds to get in. I can see people now joining. That's cool. And let's share the presentation. Cool. And it's working now. So, hello everyone, and welcome to another startup seminar. I hope you're all keeping well. It's now lockdown version 2.0, as you can probably tell from my facial hair, and it's been growing massively over the months. Today we run our sixth event, and it's going to be awesome. But before we get to it, the usual to-do list or the usual reminders. So we have now two seminars left. The one happening next week is with Naeem, the founder of Notepad, and how to build an awesome brand. And then the following week, we have one with Cressy Welding, the founder of Elvis, and Cress, how to pitch like a pro. So these will be the last two seminars. Take your time to point your iPhone or your Android phone to the QR code so you can register for these last two events. And don't forget that upon attending 6 or more seminars, you can email us on cityventures@city.ac.uk to request your certificate for these sessions. Also happening tomorrow, we have the Find the Founders event. And for this event, we're trying to tackle one of the issues that some of the students feedback the team about, and that was the networking opportunities. So with this event tomorrow, we'll give you a chance to meet a team of establishing founders. I'll tell you more about them in a second. We will help you to further your entrepreneurial skills. We will help you to network and meet with one another and work out a solution for the pandemic. And this all will come together to try to help you to make your business come true. So again, point your phone, use the QR code, and do register so you do not miss this event. Like I was saying, for this event, we have invited the co-founders of Toastel, Louisa Zane and Rob Wilson. Toastel is no more than a beer that is made of surplus bread. So bread that otherwise would go to waste is now becoming beer. I tried it and it's really good, but I do hope to see you tomorrow and come to listen to Louisa and Rob telling you more about how they built Toastel and why it's important to be in a team that has different expertise and different skills. So City Spark Recovery Challenge. So the City Spark Recovery Challenge is what City Spark used to be, but this year we kind of revamping it slightly. And this is to help you and to find solutions for COVID-19. I've just been told by Alex that maybe you can't see my slides, which is a shame, but I'm happy to share them with you at the end of the session. But as I was saying, the City Spark, the Recovery Challenge, is the City Spark competition that is going to take place at the end of the month, and we are hoping that you can apply by visiting us at city-spark.co.uk and apply with your business idea. We have 4 prizes and £1,000 each, so you can tell us more about the solutions that you have for COVID-19. In terms of the usual reminder, one of them is the business advice. So make sure that you tune in to come and speak to one of us in the team so we can help you to start your business, working on your business idea. All of this can be found on city.ac.uk/entrepreneurship. Head there and you will find more information about all the events that we're running. You can access the previous seminars. You can access the business advice that we offer to the students. So now, without further ado, I'm going to start introducing the speakers for tonight's session. And I'm going to start with Akash. So Akash, if you don't mind tuning in. Hello, Akash. Akash is a VC analyst at Augmentum. It's a fintech fund. we used to be colleagues. He was part of the CAS Entrepreneurship Fund, and he's also a City alumni. He was doing the BSc in Accounting and Finance class of 2018. And next, I'm going to introduce Tzvete. So if you don't mind tuning in, Tzvete. Hello there. There she is. She's a visiting analyst at Amplifier. She's currently based in Berlin. And Amplifier is a supply chain VC fund. Tzvete also runs on the side ecosystem, aiming to facilitate and democratize the access across the venture industry. So that's Tzvete, sorry. Next, I'm going to introduce Tom. Hello, Tom. Hello there. And Tom is the founder or co-founder of SyndicateRoom. I should add that Tom is a former football player, which is even more impressive. And SyndicateRoom is an equity crowdfunding platform. Tom, alongside with SyndicateRoom, is also a non-executive director for UKBAA, the Business Angel Associations for the UK, and is also a board member in the City Ventures Advisory Board. And last but not least, I'm introducing now Gina. Hello, Gina. And Gina is the founder of Nariatech. Nariatech is used to understand how healthy your gums and your teeth are. And she is also, like Akash, a City alumni. She did the BSc in Biomechanical Engineering in class of 2015. And this is the panel that we have for you today. I'm going to leave you in the good hands of Gina, the moderator, and good luck, guys. I'll tune in a second to read all the questions that we have in the Q&A. For our audience, questions, use the Q&A button. We'll be answering them later on tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Nice, thank you, Rui. Hello, everyone. It's strange because I can't see you, but I feel like I'm just kind of welcome to how to make money and raise funds for your business or future business. So thank you for coming today. We're going to ask everyone some questions today. At the end, we're going to hand over to you guys and you can send over your questions and we'll get them answered. So I think a great way to start off, which is how everyone starts off, is it would be great to get an introduction from each of you. What do you do? And in a nutshell, how did you actually get to where you are today? Maybe we can start off with you, Akash.
Yep. Thank you, Gina. Pleasure to be here. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I've recently joined Augmentum FinTech. So we're Europe's only publicly listed FinTech-focused VC firm. What that means is we're not like most VC firms in that we don't have a typical structure whereby we raise once from limited partners and then we deploy that capital. Instead, we raise from the public markets on an ongoing basis, and we have a permanent capital vehicle. But that's just sort of operationally sort of some going into the weeds a bit. But what we're focused on is FinTech. So we're focused on FinTechs at Series A onwards. And so I've just joined a few weeks ago and sort of picking up the origination side and looking at new deals, but also internal processes and definitely evaluating companies as I was before this at the CAS Entrepreneurship Fund, where I was for a year. And we were at CAS, we were looking at companies at the late seed stage. So where you're beginning to get some traction, you're beginning to generate some revenue as a business. And just before you raise like a big Series A round, that's sort of the sweet spot for CAS. And then before that, I was at Barclays in their ventures arm, looking not to do strategic investing as such, but mostly partnerships with FinTechs to incubate projects internally and co-create new products as well. And that's sort of when my journey into venture really began. So yeah, that's a bit about me and how I got here.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Thank you, Akash. Yes, Tzvete, take it over, your turn. Intro, where you're from, what you're doing, and yeah, how did you get to where you are today?
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here. I am originally from Bulgaria, and I recognize a few Bulgarian names in the participants. So yeah, good to virtually meet. But I guess because most of you are probably students, so how I got here today starts from university level. So I went to UK in order to do my bachelor's degree there, and I studied international relations. So this perhaps is not the most typical career path in going to venture, but it just shows you that there is no such thing as a straightforward degree. No matter what you are studying, you are learning applicable skills in the future. So I studied international relations from Queen Mary, and after that I went into media. So that was my first role prior to then joining the tech side from a startup perspective. I was in a prop tech startup. But I always I understood and I discovered the side of venture. So I started wanting to work on, to change and to be more involved with meeting the entrepreneurs and meeting the founders and understanding what is the problems that they're solving and how they want to change the world. So I got to where I am today with a lot of work. Very shortly put. But right now I'm at Amplifier. So Amplifier is a supply chain focused VC fund and innovation unit spun out of the shipping industry, and we invest across the entire supply chain, seed and Series A, Europe, the US, and Israel. Very much looking forward to the discussion. On the side, I run a project that I started with the aim of democratizing the venture industry called Ecosystem. So if you go on ecosystem.substack.com, you would find my newsletter there and the online initiatives that I have done. But the aim is exactly that, to get a better understanding of how venture works.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. And least but definitely not last but not least, flip it all around, we got Tom. So yeah, intro in a nutshell, how did you get to where you are and what kind of investment space are you in?
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in Los Angeles to a British dad. So I was the funny kid playing soccer on the streets while everyone else played baseball. Went to university in University of California, Irvine, studied economics, but was always interested in technology. So out of university, I spent a year working for an IT consultancy firm, and then realized I didn't want to do that anymore. So I just packed my bag, moved to the UK, and attempted to be a professional footballer, playing a few years in the Scottish third and second division. As unglamorous as it is, I wasn't making a lot of money doing that. So I was doing part-time work for a company called The Trainline. So trainline.com, mobile apps and website. And when I realized that it was something that I enjoyed doing, I kind of packed up the football career and went full-time working in product and development for Trainline. Got really lucky with the timing. It was when mobile was becoming a big thing. So I got to lead the mobile apps initial development, which we launched and had something like 5 million downloads in the first year, which back in 2009, 2010 was a big deal. I made the Trainline quite a bit of money, and when they decided to sell the business, I figured that I would get something from it, and then was told that I didn't have any equity in the business because I was kind of part-time worker at the start and then joined later on full-time. So felt kind of cheated, not gonna lie. Hurts a little bit, but that was the motivation for me to go back to business school. And at business school, I was fortunate enough to meet a guy who had an idea that evolved into SyndicateRoom. And SyndicateRoom started life as an investment platform for letting people co-invest into startups alongside angel investors. But over the last couple of years has morphed into its own data-driven venture fund for kind of seed up to Series A rounds.
Wow, well, if it isn't obvious to everyone watching today, we definitely have much more than wealth of knowledge and expertise here today, which is why I'm excited to get into all kinds of topics, which is kind of starting off with what are the different types of investment, what are the pros and cons, how do you know when to raise investment, and all different kinds of questions like, COVID-19, is it affecting investment, and also diversity. So there's a lot to talk about. And again, we'll get to your questions after this as well. So I think a great place to kind of start off with is, what types of investment are there out there? I'm sure a lot of participants who are kind of like tuning in have heard the words such as angel investing, VC, also some people start with bootstrapping from friends and family. So yeah, it'll be great to kind of start off the discussion with what are the different types of investment out there. We can kind of throw it around, and who's suited for what and what stage.
Sure. I'll jump in just to make it easy. So you'll hear all the terms that you mentioned before. If we start with a couple of them, the idea of bootstrapping is effectively building the business without seeking external funding. So sweat equity is a term that's often used, or just raising a little bit of capital from friends and family, or doing it all yourself, mortgaging your house, selling all of your childhood memorabilia, whatever it is. Bootstrapping is not taking on external investors, or at least from those you don't know. There's a lot of businesses that got fame from bootstrapping early on. So even like Apple computers and such didn't take investment until a bit later in their development. But it is a very hard thing to do, in particular if you live in, say, London, where rent is incredibly expensive and the cost of co-working space or the cost of hiring someone to help you with the business is extreme. So you kind of find that bootstrapping is not out of fashion, but typically what repeat founders who have made money before do in their second or third venture. Angel investing, which you talked about, is something that we're heavily involved with. So business angels are individuals who often invest as part of a group, sometimes individually, into early stage ventures. If you look at the stats in the UK market, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 billion pounds is invested by these individuals into early stage companies. So there's a lot of capital there. And it's actually something that investors can gain tax relief from doing. So it de-risks it for them a bit. Above the angels, you've got VCs, like my colleagues on the panel. And VCs typically focus on different stages. So you've got seed VCs who go in really early into a company when there might just be an idea or a little more than that. You've got kind of your Series A VCs who look at once the company's got a bit of traction, sorry. And then you've got your later stage companies, which come in once the companies are a bit more established. Now, there are VCs that span up and down that list and will do kind of everything. So Atomico is a huge fund based in London that has pre-seed with angels, seed capital, Series A, and follow on in later rounds. But your traditional fund will focus on a specific stage. And one thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to spend too much time approaching funds, VCs, or angels that aren't interested in your stage. So as much as VCs will do homework on you as a business, you should definitely do homework on them and what they're interested in, the stage that they go in, so that you're not sending out emails and feeling rejected a lot more than you need to be.
I think it's an interesting one. When we first raised investment, we've done family and friends, we've done the whole, angel investing. We also did something called, if anyone's heard, is accelerator programs. So there can be like 3-month programs where you get, a small amount of investment, either £15,000 or £20,000, and they support you for 3 months. And I think, I've met many other startups, and since that journey, I've had many people say like, okay, so I've started my business, I've got a logo and I'm ready to raise investment. Where do I go? They don't know where to go. A lot of them, do throw around the word VC. It's a very popular word, VC. I'm going to go get funding from VC. When is the right time to get funding from a VC? What stage would you recommend someone to approach a VC? Is it that simple?
So I'd say if you're happy to, I can take a stab at it.
Jump in, and then I will follow.
Yeah, I think it's I think there's a perception that raising funding from VCs is sexy, or it's something that's seen as signaling a lot of good things about you as a company, but actually VC funding is appropriate for a very small proportion of companies. And the way to understand that is to understand how VC fund economics work. And in a nutshell, really, a VC fund is venture capital is a very risky asset class, and venture funds take a lot of risk in the investments they make. And in a portfolio of, let's say, 10 companies that they invested in, they would expect a third of those to fail, and for them to lose all their money. A third of those to just return their investment, and then maybe of the remaining third, 1 or 2 of those would be a decent return, maybe 3x and a 5x. But to really justify the management fees that they charge, they would have to have the final company be a 100x return or something stupidly insane. The implication of that is that venture capital funds are looking for companies that are just going to have a hyper growth trajectory, and that can basically have huge markets that can in every year hit certain milestones, so they can raise their next round and then raise their next round, and then go from, you know, you're always on the treadmill of hitting your milestones of your metrics and making sure you're showing a linear growth trajectory, even an exponential one ideally, but at least a fairly steep linear one. So what that means is, you know, this type of funding, this type of equity funding from venture capital investors is mostly relevant, I think, for companies who really have that vision of becoming category defining world beaters, or who have huge markets that they're going into and they want to be $100 million businesses or £100 million businesses. And if you're setting up a business with another mission of maybe you have other intrinsic reasons to do that business, it could be it's a problem you really want to solve, but you're not as commercially motivated, or you don't see this hyper growth pressure as something that you'd like to have on you as a business as you're scaling, then it's not really a good fit. And I think you'll soon, if you did have that agenda of actually having your business sort of grow sustainably and in time, and you actually took VC investment, I'm sure you'd soon find that your investor on your board is going to agitate for you to speed things up, or for you to take an approach that maybe isn't in line with what you'd like to do. So the bigger point from all of that is that it's appropriate for a very small percentage of companies. And outside of that, most businesses, I would say, VC funding goes to, I think, 1 or 2% of companies, just to give you like a reference point. So all the other companies are obviously not bad businesses in any way. And many of them actually bootstrap a long way, and then they raise funding, and then they still become successful, phenomenal businesses. But I think there's a misconception that VC funding is so ubiquitous, that a lot of companies are raising this funding, and that, you know, it's the hallmark that you have to rise to. But that's just not the case. And for the remaining 90% of businesses that are out there, taking out a bank loan or taking out debt is often a route, obviously, for companies and founders who don't have the net wealth to bootstrap, simply because, you know, if you don't have friends or family who can lend you that money, or you don't have a savings pot that you can tap into, it's very difficult otherwise to obviously finance that, and the salary sacrifice that you're taking of leaving your job. So I would say, if you are going down the route of being a hyper growth business, then VC funding, and as a preliminary to that, angel funding is necessary and appropriate. But for the vast majority of businesses, it's the more steady state path of bootstrapping, probably taking some debt if you can, ideally being sustainable in that your revenue and your cash flow fuels your growth. So I just think it's important to dispel that notion.
Yeah.
I just want to add on that, that if you want to grow, pretty much what Akash said, but if you want to grow organically, then probably VC funding is not the right type of funding for you. And it's not easy to get the VC funding, just as Akash mentioned. So it is a full-time job. So I think about at least 5%, 5 to 25%, even when you're not fundraising as a founder, will be spent doing fundraising conversations or talking with investors, building these relationships. If you decide to go for VC funding, I guess there are certain metrics that make your business VC backable, but it's never too early to start reaching out to the relevant investors, to start building out this network, even as you are in university. I think that's something that you can leverage on here. You have access to great resources on campus, and I think it's good to find common points that you can leverage on as you are in university, and trying to see, if your business is, if you want to go for VC funding, what are the steps that you need to take early on? And I think pre-plan in advance, because let's say that you decide to raise VC funding, it's a process that has to be kickstarted way in advance, and it will not take unless you are very well connected in the industry, it's likely to take quite a bit of time. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, like you guys mentioned the timing. I think it's one of those things where, you know, I remember early on where I thought, okay, I'm going to go raise some investment now. And yeah, well, you know, in 2 months, I'll have the investment in the bank, and then, oh, it's great, and I have the money, and I can just go do the product development that I want to do. And I do hear a lot of founders kind of say similar stuff when they don't have that experience, which is, okay, yeah, I'm going to close that fund, I'm going to do this. And they kind of forget the whole networking aspect, you know, changing the pitch decks. There's a lot that kind of needs to go on. So I think something that might be helpful to kind of talk about is, what do you guys look for? What's the kind of things that you look for in terms of due diligence from companies? How do you recommend they kind of begin the process, and what's kind of involved in it?
Yeah, well, I can continue off briefly on that. I think right now, in an all remote environment, in an all virtual environment, you have to. It's good from one side because you have access to virtually the whole world in a much wider, in a way that you didn't have previously. Because the reality is, most of us spent a lot of time at home in front of the computer. So just this logistics element is eliminated, and you can get the person's attention much quicker. So it's up to you how you're going to approach the situation. Obviously, creating a targeted, even beyond pitching, even beyond the first call, you have to create a targeted email. If you don't have a connection to this investor already, you have to explain why is it that they should meet you, and what makes you, first of all, what makes your business better, 10 times better than what's already out there, and what makes your team, because you're likely to be early stage, what makes your team better able to perform. And there are so many new tools right now that have come up, but so you can personalize your presentation in a way that perhaps wasn't possible years ago. A tool that perhaps all of the panelists know is Loom. So it's an asynchronous video tool where you can really very interactively pitch to investors. But once you are on that first call, I think the important questions to address is, what is the problem that you're solving? What is the solution? Who is the team that is going to perform? What is the expertise? What is the industry experience? What have you done up until now? So the traction that you have built, how do you see the vision grow? So what is the product roadmap? Those are key questions. What is the market size? Obviously, that's also very relevant. How do you calculate the market? The solution that you have, what was done previously by these people in order to solve this problem? I think it's very good to have. And right now, there isn't a pitch that is not going to factor in COVID. Just because it's a very structural change in many industries that it has created. And I don't want to dominate the conversation, so I'll let other panelists jump in.
Sure. Just looking at the angel round, because the angels tend to go in earlier than most VCs. The biggest thing that they're looking for is the team, and a sense of if the team is able to deliver on what they've got in their plan. And in that plan, like, there's a balance between being too ambitious and they'll never achieve that, versus being too conservative. Angels, they obviously, like any investor, want to see an opportunity for a good return. So there has to be some ambition, and they know that oftentimes what founders do is they go, oh, well, the market is 100 billion and we're going to get 10% of that. So that's going to be 10 billion market by year 3. And you're just like, that's completely unrealistic. So they want a sense of balance and ability to deliver on that. But I mean, the truth is, they know that those first projections that you're making are going to be not unachievable, but likely unachievable in that time frame that you specify it. So they just have to understand how realistic you are and how good they think you'll be on being able to deliver to that.
Yeah, all I mean, I'll echo everything. I think the only thing I'd add is that it definitely is obviously an exercise of belief. VC investors believe that even if you don't meet your forecasts, you'll still execute really well. And so I think when you are at the early stages at pre-seed and seed, it is a case of demonstrating how you're best placed to solve this problem. And why you're the best team, and if some other team walked in a week later, why they should still pick you. So the more ways you can demonstrate that, as Tom said and as Tzvete said, the better, especially at those early stages. And at Series A onwards, obviously, the numbers speak for themselves. So it's really about, I think over time, founders get much better at the process of fundraising and exactly how they should orchestrate meetings, but it's mostly about demonstrating your strengths, and sometimes it can be a style over substance thing. So, you know, you should take some time into your pitch deck, make sure that maybe get a few designers to look at it, because it does send a bad first impression if you send a deck that's really ugly, to be frank, or doesn't show enough attention to detail. The more time you put in, the more it speaks to certain traits, because the truth is that VCs will look at a deck for maybe 10 minutes and they'll make a first impression. And that first impression could be probably unjustified, but you need to obviously mitigate against that.
Yeah, and probably worth adding to that, there's definitely some red flags, sorry, because we talked about like, oh, yeah, what you should do, but there's definitely things that like put me as an investor off. And I think the biggest one is a sense of naivety from the founder on competition in particular, and things that are potentially substitutes for what it is you're doing. So like, for example, the number of decks where I see someone saying, we're the only ones who do this, and there's nothing like that. Yeah, as Akash said, the first skim through a deck, spend 10 minutes, look for something that's interesting, but also look for any red flags. And when I see things like that, when you're just like, they haven't really considered the market, their positioning in the market, or got to intimately understand their competition, I just go, no. I want my founders, if I'm going to invest, to know exactly what they're up against, why that's going to fall down, why they can replace that or beat that. So having a true understanding of the whole of their market is useful.
I think that's a really funny point, because I remember that we've been doing this for 5 years now, and we raised like just under $500,000. But I remember on the first kind of meetings that we did, we had a presentation to an investor, and we said, and the competition is, we actually had a photo of a Sahara, and we said no one, and we thought we were so smart to say that there's no one doing what we're doing, and we didn't expect that the investor's expression would be like disappointed. We thought it was great that no one was doing what we're doing, but actually you don't realize that you don't have to literally find someone you do, you need to have an understanding of the market. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of other founders who think that it's great to find someone that doesn't know what they're doing, but you're not representing the market, isn't it?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you're not, even if no one's doing it exactly as you're doing it, you're replacing something. And what is it that you're replacing? It might not be apples for apples, but what is it that you're going to fill their life with, and that they're giving something up for, and figuring out what that is, and why you're better than what that thing is. It shows you know the market better. So,
and to echo that as well, most pre-seed, on the panel we have a fintech focused fund and a supply chain focused fund, but at early stage and a pre-seed and seed level, there are a lot of investors that are not experts in your field. So I want you to be the expert, and I want you to tell me who is the how does the market look, who is the competitors, and if for example we get on a call and it has to be the investors to tell you, oh, have you heard about company X? Well, that's very big red flag, because you have not sized up your market correctly. And I think and also being vague on the competition slide, it doesn't do favors. It has to be, I think it has to be the opposite. And other red flags are just, it's not exactly a red flag, because I think it's more of the not knowing to put it, but it's always good to have a clear ask in the deck. Stating exactly what is the fundraising amount that you're going for, any exact traction is always good to have too.
On the flip side, it would be really interesting to understand, like, what are the green flags? Like, what are some great pitch decks that you've seen, and what made them stand out, or what are some great meetings or kind of cold calls that you've had? Is there anything that, from the last kind of entrepreneurs you've been in touch with that's kind of stood out to you that, aspiring entrepreneurs can take away from this as well?
It would be easy to say the opposite of all those things, but I think where firstly, if the chemistry of the management team is good. I think that shows through in a first meeting with the company. And especially at the earlier stages, that's important, because if a CEO is a commercially driven one and then the CTO is the one who's actually going to build the product and the tech, you can't have a fallout, and you can't have a pair of founders who don't see eye to eye or are not fully aligned, because the business is reliant on both of them performing to the best of their abilities, and so chemistry, I think, is very, very important. I think it's, again, a bit of a cop-out answer, but yes, if you show awareness, self-awareness, A, of your market and all the competitors, but also B, of what's lacking in your business. So maybe that you need to hire the right sales team. Some people can be arrogant about that and just think, I already, there's very few flaws with the business, I just need funding to sort of provide some fuel. But the folks who are self-aware and actually show that, one, emotional intelligence, so that they know when they're actually going to hire people, you can almost trust that they will make good hires instead of having to go through a recruiter or something else. And secondly, they're humble, or they're just introspective in terms of, here's clearly the product function hasn't worked out, so therefore we need to make a change. So some dynamism there is very important, because if a CEO isn't able to observe all of those aspects of their business and critique them and analyze them every day, then I just think you just lose efficiency and you lose potential and you cap your upside. So where a founder shows a lot of self-awareness, like, when I raise this funding, here's some clear areas I'm going to identify and invest that money into, but then they can go like several layers deeper and say that in the product, the reason this is in the roadmap and not this is because I've put this much thought into it. And secondly, here are the hires I plan to make. And the reason those hires I prioritize over other ones is because of my experiences with this. So it's just, diligence really, and the amount of thought that's gone into it, which is obviously a very generic answer, but that is just the truth. And when there are very few proof points at the seed stage, you mostly have to rely on these qualitative traits and what you observe in the founder. Because I think it would be great to drive up every day to their office to see how they're checking in on them, but instead you just have to rely on a few meetings and some materials they've shared with you. So in that time, you have to make a judgment call, and at the earliest stages, it's obviously on their personality and the desire and drive, ambition, etc., that they've shown.
I guess for me, I already kind of mentioned it, but a really good green flag is being able to very clearly and succinctly explain and to make the investor or whoever you're speaking to aware of what is exactly the need for your solution and the need for your startup. And I think being able to clearly communicate is very important. Being able to having this founder charisma, I find at Seed is very key because this will help you. First of all, as a founder, you're always selling. You are either selling your product or you are, selling to potential investors. It could be even selling your vision to employees, right? So you have to be, as a founder, able to find the right people, able to motivate them and to inspire them in order to join you on this mission. So I think just having this, it's very vague perhaps as an answer, but it's just this kind of personality traits that are very important for a founder. And if you don't have that, let's say, just find the right team that, for example, you have a co-founder that could go and could pitch those, could do those pitches instead. And you could be, on the backside, which is still very important, but just understand who is to do what within the team.
No, I don't think it's vague. I think it's one of those things that sometimes is overlooked. Like you said, like in the beginning, like Akash was saying, as well as you, Tzvete, is it's us that they're looking for. Like when there's not much there, it's us they're investing. It's our passion, it's our knowledge, it's our understanding of the market, like Tom was saying. So sometimes people may not realize that, our understanding of what we're doing is we're convincing you, we're trying to be the experts and how important our character is. I don't know if there's any kind of green flags you kind of wanted to bring up, Tom, or whether you wanted to move on to the next topic.
Personalization of pitch. I think that was kind of already said earlier, but when someone knows what I've invested in before and the types of things that I look for and picks that up, it's like if you're expecting me to give you time, energy, and effort, at least do the same and look into what I tend to look for. So.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think that's also advice that we got from advisors. So, you know, before we kind of approach the VC fund, which is kind of the topic we're going to go back onto, is I'd read about who the person is I'm approaching. Even within the VC, I'd understand like what specific products are they interested in themselves? Do they have any passions? Is it what kind of health tech are they interested in? And kind of actually approaching that person. Also, you know, there's a difference between cold kind of emailing someone, which is you directly, you know, find them on LinkedIn, or you kind of find a way to contact them, or you know someone that knows someone. So, or warm contacts is what they call it, is kind of what we've been using. And it kind of goes into the topic of, we've talked about what's important as an investor, but for someone who's actually gaining investment, is there anything they kind of need to think about when they approach a VC or when they approach an angel? Is this something that they should consider for themselves to understand whether this is the right type of investor for their company?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could jump on that. That just as VCs are doing reference checks and are doing due diligence on companies, as a founder, you should also do the same. And right now, there is a lot of resources online. The world is open, so you can easily look up the investors that you're speaking with, the firm, and do your own research. Yeah, do your own research on the feedback that there is in the community as well. So the best way is to speak with portfolio founders if you can. That's what I would absolutely recommend. And there is a certain, for example, let's say that you're pitching a firm that is smaller. So because VC is looking for the company that will return the fund at the end. So having this kind of smaller fund ticket from a smaller fund means that it's not going to be this very, very, very aggressive growth as you would for a very large fund. So just keep that in mind as well, and find the investors that are the right fit for you. Yeah.
I think you made a great point before anyone else jumps in on the kind of portfolio company. So if anyone doesn't know what that is, you know, for example, let's say there's a angel investor that you saw on LinkedIn. You can actually see you can go onto a website such as Crunchbase. You can understand what companies they've previously invested in. You could actually reach out to the founders of that startup and say, hey, I can see that this person invested in you. I'd love to understand your experience. Or if there's a VC or an accelerator, you can actually find out. You can actually go onto their website, see what companies they invested in, actually reach out to them. You'd be surprised how much startups are happy to help you and let you know how their experience was with that investor and whether it was good or whether they'd kind of recommend probably not to go with that investor.
There is also this website recently launched that is like the Glassdoor for VCs. So I can share the link in the chat if that is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo everything that they said, and I think it's slightly controversial, but actually there is a lot of signaling value that comes from raising from certain VCs. If you raise from certain, even angels, I think this is at the angel stage, it's more common in the US that if you raise from a few fairly recognizable names, then and subsequently from really recognizable tier one venture capital firms, what that allows you to do, I think, is firstly instill a lot of confidence in your employees. I think it just sends a really good signal to the market that, you know, these top funds and top angels have looked at this company, have done their due diligence, and have concluded that this is a company they want to invest in. And generally, you know, people read a lot into that. That could be employees, that could be suppliers, that could be customers. Your entire ecosystem really as a business receives that signal. So I guess, you know, the most obvious example is to say like Sequoia Capital, who are seen as one of the, if not the most successful firms, venture capital firms in the world. If someone raises from them, you know, it sends a really big commotion through the ecosystem, and everyone is aware of it, and everyone's like, oh, why did they invest? What did they see in it? And as a CEO of that business, you can actually piggyback off of that that hype and that good PR and press. So that is something, but I think that's mostly a luxury. I don't think most companies should be thinking that way, and certainly not if it comes to a company or a VC who has 20 portfolio companies and won't be able to give you attention. and another investor who doesn't and has much more time to give you a more value add. And so, yeah, on that latter point, I think you should, as part of your founder references, definitely determine if these VCs, the VC who's interested in you is one that does actually add value as a board member, as an investor. Do they make introductions? What sort of networks do they have? What is their previous experience in actually helping businesses in your segment, either as an investor or as an operator? I think you should really be careful about it, because it is like a marriage. You're going to be with your investor hopefully till the end, for as long as you're a private company. So yeah, definitely more than most real marriages. So you have to be careful, because you can't cut ties afterwards. So you should be very diligent ahead of making that decision, and really see if this is a personality that you work with, because sometimes you can take the firm but not think about who the partner is who's going to be working with you specifically. So there's a lot to consider. I do think some of those considerations are luxuries and only afforded to very, very few companies. But even then, if you have even 1 or 2 term sheets, that doesn't mean that you should be desperate and just take the money. You should still consider whether you're better off not taking money from this VC if the relationship's just going to be bad from day one.
I think we can probably go off into our last question, and we can open up to everyone else. I know, Tzvete, you kind of touched upon this. I can open up to everyone else and we can continue this conversation, is COVID. So obviously, a lot has happened, in the beginning, obviously, when it came about, a lot of companies had difficulty. We weren't sure, how things were going to go, especially us as well as a company. It was difficult for us kind of in the beginning. We were in the middle of raising investment, and then COVID happened and we just had to kind of just stop everything. So what has kind of happened? What has COVID caused? Has it caused, what's the latest with VC funds? How is it going with, SyndicateRoom? What's the latest basically in terms of Corona, and how is it affecting the investment space? And is it?
Yes. Next question. So we co-invest with angels, and the angels have remained quite active. At the start of COVID, it was very much supporting existing portfolio companies, so there weren't a ton of new investments. As things progressed by kind of like June, July, they started looking more at new investments because the portfolios had been settled. But as a trend in the whole of the market, because we run lots of analysis on it, what's tended to happen is that there's been a shift from bigger angels and earlier VCs to invest slightly later than they would typically invest. So we're seeing larger Series A's taking place, but fewer of them, much larger B and C rounds that have participation from typical Series A firms investing in them. And there's kind of been this gap between what was typically a small Series A round and what the angels are doing, where some companies are raising again from angels instead of trying to do a Series A, and companies that might have done a Series A, we're doing a Series A trying to raise more, so they're getting more interest from the VC. And so companies that are kind of in the, I would say, raising $1.5 million to maybe 3 mil, there's like very few of those rounds happening. It's either you're going bigger or you're kind of going smaller to raise a bit of capital to see you through to next year to when you can do a proper A round. So it's not great for companies that are just starting out doing first investments. I think the market, though, and given that the announcement of the vaccine, will kind of start to come back in Q1, maybe towards the end of Q1 next year. Not saying the rounds aren't happening, it's just we're seeing a lot fewer of those kind of companies raising 100 to say 300K.
I would say one of the biggest trends that I've personally noticed, and I think everyone that you speak with would echo the same, it's about the bigger difference that there is between founders who are, for example, very well networked and very well connected within the industry, have the right background, have the right even previous founder experience, that are able to close rounds much quicker. And I think there is a shorter amount of even diligence time for this type of company. So top tier founders would be able to raise quite easily. And I think there is perhaps an even bigger power shift in their favor. And there is also on the other side, the founders who are on the fringes, who are without existing networks and would struggle to raise funding at seed or at later stage. I think that's just two sides that we will see because the gap is widening.
Yeah, I would just add that I think a lot of people had predictions about how COVID would fundamentally alter the way we invest and the geographic, I guess, diversity of investments. Because I think one very easy argument to make was that because we're not flying out any longer to Tallinn in Estonia or some Central and Eastern Europe, that more pan-European funds would truly be pan-European and not just invest in the geographies where they have offices. I don't think that's largely panned out yet. I do think that that this is a good tailwind for that, in that more funds are looking at geographies where they wouldn't previously, just because they can't even fly to Scotland if they wanted to. So might as well, expand your remit and cast a wide net. I think what COVID has done for companies is that it's shown how resilient they can be, and businesses who otherwise are in industries affected severely by COVID, if they've been able to be robust and adapt to those circumstances, then I think most investors are drawing insights from that about how good the management team is, how durable the business is, and eventually things will recover in some shape into a new world. But some things will be here to stay, and so I think people, it's not like everyone stopped investing in travel. Okay, mostly probably, but in some of these sectors that are hard hit, there is still opportunities. And if a company and a management team can demonstrate how they're well positioned for when we are somewhat on a recovery, or we get to 60-70% of what we used to be, the world used to be like, I think VCs will take a long-term view. It's not a case of just, which businesses are going to do the best in the next 12 months, because it's only a matter of when, not if, that this passes and it's behind us, of course, in a new world. But yeah, even though if deal volumes are down or investment rounds are concentrated at the later stage where companies have already shown a lot of potential, clear traction and are massive businesses, I don't think that I do think that we'll soon touch wood with the vaccine, see a recovery in volumes and entrepreneurship generally, more people feeling emboldened to do that, and for the funding to be there at the pre-seed level.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think for us as well, we know obviously we were supposed to raise funding during this time, and for us we're just getting into survival mode now. Just get through this, do everything else we can do, and just get through the other side when the climate's a bit better. I think it'll be a good time now to answer some questions that people online have. So Ruz, I don't know how you want me to kind of take it.
Thank you, Gina. I can see that you guys can see the questions as well, but I think this is a good time for me to say thank you for everyone for your insights and input. I'm conscious that we are close to 7:30, but if it's okay with everyone, we will take a few questions from our audience. And from our audience, please feel free to hit that Q&A button, send us your questions. I'll be reading them out now to our panelists. So this is an interesting one that I was just going through. So Reda is asking, hello Reda, thank you for your question. Do you think that getting VC's investment gives your company more credibility, or are they two separate subjects? So VC's investment in one hand and credibility, or are they completely different realities? What do you guys think?
I think Akash was touching upon this, wasn't it? In terms of some of the famous kind of VCs and their credibility, wasn't it, Akash?
Yep. I think, yeah, it's an edge case where, there's a few VCs who, if you raise funding from them, you're almost automatically on the CRMs of all the other later stage investors, because if from a Series A point of view, we track a few seed funds because we know they're really good, and seed funds are probably tracking some angels. And so it influences even your ability to fundraise later on. But yes, all those signaling effects and credibility does come from a few funds. I wouldn't say that's the case for the industry as a whole. There's a lot of funds that most funds actually are not sort of household names. Of course, this is a very small industry. So I wouldn't read too much into that, but generally to be VC backed, yes, it's a nice statement that you can make. And I do think, as Tzvete said, you're always selling as a founder, and it does help your pitch to say that you're VC backed, because it implies that investors have done their due diligence into your business, or they've looked at you as a team and determined that you're a good bet, as opposed to having no external validation. But at the same time, I wouldn't equate every investor with adding credibility, and I also think you shouldn't weigh that too heavily as a factor in your decision whether to take funding from an investor. You should think, if the time isn't right, then you can postpone it and bootstrap or wait until maybe the valuation you get is more aligned with the type of dilution you'd like to take. And sometimes there can be some predatory pricing. So, it's a factor, but it's not huge.
Okay. Thank you, Akash. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add. That's cool. So moving on to the next one, and I think this is an interesting question from Ritu. Do you have any VC funds interested in investing in fintech startups dealing with African markets? And I'm probably going to rephrase this question in a different way as well, saying where some of these people can start looking if they are looking for a VC fund or for any opportunities. Are there any websites that you can recommend, or any platforms where you recommend people going to start looking into what's available to them?
Yeah, the BVCA website, so the British Venture Capital Association, has a directory on it that you can see the funds that are members of the BVCA and what they invest in. From an angel perspective, if you go to the UK Business Angel Association website, they too have a directory of different angels and angel groups on it. So I would give those two a start. Specifically to the question being asked, I mean, I'm sure Akash knows a few others, but Investec have a venture fund that focuses on fintech, and they have a large interest in backing companies in Africa. So they might be one to speak to, though they're generally not interested in seed rounds.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Kona Capital is one to look at, QUONA. Catalyst Fund is another one. Partech as well. I'm sure there's some other names I can dig out and maybe send to you, Rui, so you can pass on.
Okay, that's food for thought. Speaking of which, the presentation.
But to be fair, this is all information that you should be, as a founder, be able to find out yourself with a simple Google search.
just trying to make it easy for people.
There is nothing easy, if you want to be a founder and if you want to be an entrepreneur.
I agree with that.
Okay, this is a tough panel, so guys, watch out. A question from Georgie. Thank you, Georgie, for your question. Is it better to get funding by multiple investors or single strategic investments?
I think you should, if you have the luxury of considering multiple investors, and well, it really just depends. So if you're raising the quantum of your round is one that one investor wants to take entirely, then you need to weigh whether you feel the other investors who are interested add enough value to you, because then it's not a capital. You're not taking their money just for the capital. You're taking it for everything else that they bring with them. So all things being equal, if the size of the round does not concern you any longer, then you should only consider these other investors if they actually demonstrate other ways they can add value, because then maybe you need to increase the round a little bit. You have to consider the effect of that on your dilution. And also if that does affect the valuation in any way, if other investors want to come in and make the round a bit bigger, but then the valuation goes up, and then, as an early stage company, does that affect you for your future rounds. And also there's a case for not having a very messy cap table. So having like a party round, as they say, where you have multiple investors, or that is to say multiple as in many, that can be messy for later stage investors who are just seeing all these other VCs on their angels who you need to report to. They probably maybe have included information rights in their terms, and then it becomes a hassle. So I would definitely think about that, because depending on the stake that they take, they will check in with you regularly. And if you want to be telling 50 or a certain number of people all the time about how you're doing, and unless they're all value add, that's onerous, and you need to think about that. So it's often a cost benefit exercise.
Okay, thank you, Akash. This is a very interesting question that brings another angle, and this is more on sustainable investments. So, IKEA or EK, thank you for your question. What are your thoughts about sustainable investment going forward? Is there likely to be a full shift to sustainable metrics as a factor to consider as a VC, or is the world a bit too ambitious regarding sustainable finance / investments?
There definitely has been a shift in lots of funds that focus only on sustainable investments. If you look in the UK, there's a large organization called Big Society Capital that only looks for things that have a social impact. I do think that it's on trend with where VC is headed. So you've got deep tech VCs in AI and machine learning. You've got the bio, life science, health tech VCs raising lots of money for those ventures. And then you've got quite a bit flowing into things that are sustainable. Now, the interesting thing though is that sustainability and social impact are measured on a very broad band. So it's kind of like, well, electric cars, right, have a social value because they reduce pollution. So is that considered sustainability and social impact? Yes, to most people it would be. It's not the grassroots type of venture that comes up when you think about it initially, but there's also a huge firm called Time Investment Management, which is Al Gore's associated fund, that do large late plays in sustainability and social impact. But they, like, one of the recent investments was into a software that helped manufacturing companies produce less waste material in designing. And it's like, okay, well, you wouldn't initially think sustainability and social impact, but actually it does have an element of that in it, even though the company's doing really well, because they also save companies a lot of money by reducing that waste. So yes, I think there is a trend towards things that are seen as sustainable and have social impact, but it is a broad expression.
Okay. I'm cautious of the time, maybe two more questions, and this one is a bit technical from Stefan, and he's saying thank you everyone for your insights. Thank you, Stefan, for your question. From the investor's perspective, how do you evaluate the chances and shortcomings of a simple agreement on future equity, SAFE, or the UK version, the Advanced Subscription Agreement, ASA? I think this is more to establish if you go for a simple agreement of future equity or the Advanced Subscription Agreement, and what are the chances or shortcomings that you see as a VC in going for one of those?
I prefer priced rounds. So basically it's a bet on whether or not the valuation of the company at a later date will be above or below expectation based on traction and revenue and such. Mm-hmm. So you're investing now on an undefined valuation that'll be a discount on whatever the priced round is, or a fixed price in the future. And to be honest, I view it as a net loss game or lose-lose game, because as an investor, you obviously want to get in on a good valuation. So you want to see that future valuation be lower, but you also don't want to, like, well, there's a lot of parts in it. You don't want to take too much equity from the company. You don't want to demotivate them from going on and doing good things because they have less sorry, this is going to be a long explanation. Short, I don't like it because there are multi-variables that come into play where it becomes more of a game about what the valuation should be later on. And from my perspective, and from the angel side of it, not necessarily the VC side of it, it's much easier to agree on a fixed valuation at the time of investment than try and guess what's going to happen. And with ASAs, you have to do it. I think it's within 12 months, you have to do a conversion. So it's, what is the valuation going to be in 12 months time, and discount that backwards and figure it out from there. It just gets complicated.
Okay, I'm going to, from that, Tom, and I'm probably going to wrap it up with one last question for me. You guys mentioned a lot that this relationship is like a marriage, and a lot of people just became a bit apprehensive when you mentioned it that way. So how do you maintain this relationship in the long run between your company and maybe your investor? How do you maintain a healthy relationship? How do you maintain a relationship that is based in communication, trust, and all of that? So what are your tips? And with your tips, we'll wrap up the session. How do you maintain that relationship?
I think integrity is really important. I think that's one of the key, first of all, in order for a VC to choose you and to back you, I think having a good level of integrity is important, and you have to be, let's say that you have done all the right steps and you have chosen the investor who is a good match for you. You have to feel comfortable to share whenever things are going right and whenever things are going wrong. And I think this kind of clarity in communication should be maintained. And I know it's easier said than done, but that is very true. And I think this is where, you should start from.
Okay, thank you to that. Anyone else? Maybe 1, 2 last insights on how to maintain this marriage for a long period.
I think Tom and we timed our unmute at the same time, so I didn't know if you wanted to go first, but I guess I'll go and say that I think, well, I don't have many great insights on this, I guess, since I haven't observed it over a long period, but I think, yeah, it's the simple things. It's nothing, there's no rocket science. It's, it's relationships with people. And yeah, honesty, integrity, and just, being attentive as well goes a long way. And even if an investor becomes a small proportion of your cap table, the doing right by everyone and obviously to a point, and not just overburdening yourself with unnecessary admin. If a small investor, maybe 1% stake, is asking for all these different things. So, but as much as you can, sort of making it easy, making their life easy, because they have to report back to their LPs. And the more you understand the dynamics at play at your investor's firm, the easier it becomes for you to appreciate why they're making certain requests. And I'm sure they try to do the same thing for you. So they're trying to appreciate the shoes you're in as you're scaling after closing a fundraise, and when is the right time to step back and let you be heads down and execute, and when is the right time to maybe step in if things aren't going well. So the more I think you're cognizant of that, and actually you're able to empathize, that's very helpful. And then, yeah, I guess the final thing is not doing a disservice to your investors. So if they make introductions, or if they try to help you, I think it's important that you respect that, and then you take them up on those things, and you see those things through at least, and give it a fair chance. If you sort of if you don't respect that, or you don't really take the introduction as they gave you kindly, then I think it just rubs. It can be sort of it can ruin a relationship, or it can damage a relationship, and it will hinder or reduce the chance that they'll help you in the future, or try to. So it's just, I mean, this is all like simple relationship stuff, like just be good and faithful and kind. Okay. And most things will take care of themselves.
Okay. With that, and to our audience, we'll say that for the secret for a long-term relationship, be that with an investor, or be that a relationship of any kind, integrity, honest and open communication when the times are good and then when the times are bad. And with that, I would like to thank Gina as the MC of today's show, and Tom and Tzvete and Akash for your time, your incredible insights, and to help us to learn more about getting the funds and what it means to get funds in the startup landscape. So thank you so much for your time. To our fantastic audience, thank you so much for your questions. Thank you again for tuning in. We are now 2 seminars left from finishing this year's series. Today's presentation that didn't work is now available on the seminar series webpage. You can download it from there. I just uploaded the PDF documents. And don't forget to register for next week's seminar. I'll see you again in a week's time. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay cool, stay amazing. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Big goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And speak to you again soon. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye.